When you can't have pizza anymore, you're on a strict diet. There's different ways to get dye in the game, and I'm going to show you how. You get white dye from bones. Simply take out a skeleton, take the bone to a crafting table, and you'll get 3 pieces of bone meal. Take the bone meal, put that back in the crafting table to get white dye. Next up is light gray dye. Light gray dye can be crafted from azure bluettes, oxeye daisies, and funny enough, white tulips. I originally thought white tulips would give us white dye, but that's not right. Much like with bones, go ahead and throw them in a crafting table and you'll get a piece of light gray dye. But if you have a piece of gray dye and white dye and combine them in a crafting table, you'll also get light gray dye. Speaking of gray dye, this can be obtained from the closed eye blossom. Take the closed eye blossom and throw that in a crafting table to get a piece of gray dye. But if you have a piece of white and black dye available, go ahead and throw those in and you'll get 2 pieces of gray dye. Also, black dye is super easy to get. Black dye is obtained from gaining ink sacs. To get ink sacs, all you need to do is take out a squid and take those ink sacs to a crafting table, throw those in, and you've got black dye. Red dye is probably the easiest one to get. You can obtain red dye from roses, poppies, and red tulips, as well as beetroot. Just like with the others, go ahead and find a crafting table, throw either of them in, and you'll get a piece of red dye. But if you take the rose bush, you'll actually get 2 pieces of red dye. Next up is orange. Orange is normally crafted from red dye and yellow dye to get 2 pieces of orange dye. But we can also obtain orange dye from open eye blossoms. Just like with a closed eye blossom, throw that into a crafting table and you'll get a piece of orange dye. Yellow is about as easy as red. These can be obtained from sunflowers and dandelions. But just like with the rose bush, if you throw a sunflower into a crafting table, you'll get 2 pieces of yellow dye. Then there's lime green dye. This is obtained by throwing green dye and white dye into a crafting table or your interface to get lime dye. Then to get green dye, first you gotta do is find some cactus. Go ahead and break that cactus and throw it into a furnace. Once this smelts up, you'll have a piece of green dye that you're ready to use. Just like that. Fun fact, green dye is the only dye that you can obtain from smelting. Next is my favorite, light blue dye. Light blue dye is my favorite because to get it, you need the orchid, which is the best flower in the game. Don't come at me. But you can also obtain it by combining blue dye and white dye in a crafting table. Also, put down in the comments, how many times do I say the word dye in this entire video? Next up is cyan. Cyan dye is obtained by combining green and blue dye in a crafting table or inventory. Then to get blue dye, you better go grab your pickaxe, because you'll need to find lapis lazuli. Once you find that, throw it into a crafting interface and you'll get blue dye. Then my daughter's favorite color, purple. Purple dye is obtained by combining red and blue dye. Then there's blue's best friend, magenta. Shout out to like the 3 people who know what I'm talking about. Magenta dye can be obtained from lilacs and alliums. I can't pronounce this flower. Alliums? Aluminum. I don't know. I can't say this flower. You can also combine pink and purple dye to get magenta. Also, like this video if you got the magenta reference. Then we have pink. Pink can be obtained from peonies and pink tulips. Why we can obtain it from pink tulips, but we can't obtain white dye from white tulips, I'll never know. But just like all the other flowers, go ahead and throw them in the crafting table to get the dye. Next up is brown dye. Brown dye is pretty simple. You can obtain it from cocoa beans. And much like the flowers, go ahead and throw the cocoa beans in a crafting interface to get brown dye. But now that you're an expert on dye, maybe you need to have something to dye. So check out this video on the bundle, which you can also dye. Seriously, comment down below. How many times did I say dye in this video? Also, don't forget to subscribe and always remember to be odd and wash your hands. Peace, guys.